Thank you for tuning in to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast, a no judgment zone podcast that covers lifestyle, entertainment, news, and sports. Even though KC doesn't watch sports, but these are minor details. By the way, he reads tarot cards too. Yes, I really mean it. He reads tarot cards too. And now, the host you've tuned in for, KC Phoenix.
Welcome back to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. I, of course, am your host, KC Phoenix. And, yeah. I'm doing this. I came across this story. I was like, wait a second. What's going on? But before I go any further, KIRWKC.com, main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. Now that I got that out the way, I went to some news stories, because I like to do the news stories from time to time. And I started reading, and I'm like, okay, wait a second. Is this a few thousand years late? I'm like, I thought the slaves had already been freed in Egypt. What's going on? So, yeah, apparently there is a scorpion issue in Egypt, and I'm laughing because I'm not laughing at what's happening to the people. I'm laughing just at the coincidence of the situation, because about the whole plagues and everything. And mind you, also, if you haven't listened to my other episode, when I did the Quick 3 Tarot, I was talking about Peace Be Still, and it's kind of funny that I was mentioning biblical stuff during that reading, and now I'm covering the story, which is similar to a biblical situation, for those who may not know about the plagues. Because, of course, Moses went to the Pharaoh and was like, hey, you need to let the slaves go. The Pharaoh was like, no. And Moses was like, all right. And then all the stuff started happening. And which, really good movie if you haven't seen it. It's a cute movie. Is The Prince of Egypt is good. And shockingly, I was surprised. Let me tell you the side story right quick. I know people are like, Casey, can you get to the story? I'm going to get to the story in a second. Just listen. This other movie, I was shocked that I enjoyed. And I enjoyed the movie so much that I did not look at my phone the entire time. Wow. Well, hold on. I may have looked at it once. I don't even think I looked at it once, actually. But I wasn't, because usually when I watch movies, the way you can tell if I'm fully engaged in the movie is if I'm reading articles or something while watching the movie. But if I'm not doing any of that and I'm just all in on the movie, I'm all in. The 10 Commandments, because I think there's 2 versions of the 10 Commandments. Whichever one, I guess with, what's his name? Charlton Heston or somebody like that. Whatever it was, the 10 Commandments, I watched that, and the movie is like 4 hours long, first of all. It's a long movie. And I was shocked because I was engaged throughout the entire movie. I was like, wow, it's really long. And the funny thing is that my mother had told me that was it wasn't the first date, because my parents met at a skating rink back a long, long time ago. It wasn't the first date my parents went out on, but my mother had told me it was one of the dates that they went out on. Her and my dad went to see the 10 Commandments, and it was at a drive-in movie. And my mother was like, yeah, it was like we were so into it, nothing happened. And I'm like, okay, that might have been TMI, but all right. But yeah, so if you haven't seen the 10 Commandments, you probably want to see that. And also Prince of Egypt is good. But 10 Commandments is really good. Long, but good. Just want to throw that out there. Back to this. So let me get to the story and read it right quick. I have to get it set up on my laptop. Give me a second. Usually I already have this stuff set up, but you know how that goes. Right here, I'm moving this to the side. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. And there we are on that. Bring this up. Okay, perfect. Here we go. All right. So let's see what part of Egypt this is happening in. All right. Biblical plague of deadly scorpions injures hundreds, kills 3 in Egypt. Recent intense storms in Egypt have caused a deadly flood to plow through several cities in south central Egypt. But unlike what you might think, this flood isn't made up of just water. The heavy rains, dust storms, and snow. It snows in Egypt? You learn something new every day. And snow in Aswan have driven possibly thousands of scorpions on the move. And they aren't just harmless arachnids. The scorpions in question are known as Death Stalkers. These scorpions, some of the deadliest animals on the planet, have sadly lived up to their name. As they rampaged through the region to escape rising water, they wreaked havoc on the towns they passed through. At least 3 people have died from scorpion stings and possibly 500 more have been injured, reported local Al Aram news channel. Ehab Hanafi, Undersecretary of Health Ministry in Aswan Governorate, said most of the injured have been hospitalized. He added that hospitals around the region are on red alert. The authorities have also called on doctors to return to work from vacations. Aswan Governor Ashraf Atiya temporarily suspended traffic on both highways and the River Nile due to both the storm and the scorpions. He urged residents to stay at home and avoid places where they could get hurt by wind, rain, or angry arachnids. The various kinds of extreme weather created a perfect storm for people to get stung. The intense rain and flooding ran people out of their houses, especially in rural areas, in search for dry land. Unfortunately, the scorpions did just the same. When left competing for safe places, the Death Stalkers started responding to people the only way they know how. The floods in the villages of Aswan forced the scorpions out of their hideouts, and they stung some people. Oh Allah, protect the land, the administrator of a local community news channel wrote on Facebook. According to officials, hospitals in the area had sufficient antivenom to treat those who'd gotten stung. Unfortunately, that did little to help the residents of the remote areas where the scorpions were the most active. The Death Stalker, scientifically known as, that's a long name, Liurus KIRWKC. Okay. Yeah. It's one of those scientific names. Is one of the 24 scorpions that are common in the Egyptian desert. And is also the meanest out of the bunch. Go figure. The scorpions aren't called Death Stalkers for nothing. They're some of the most dangerous animals on the planet, killing upwards of 3,000 people every single year. Sheesh! Okay, their sting is extremely painful, but the agony is the least of your worries. Their venom consists of a potent cocktail of neurotoxins that can utterly ravage the human body. Among the initial symptoms of Death Stalker envenomation are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fever, headaches, and abdominal cramps. If it kills you, it's most likely because the venom filled your lungs with fluid and caused them to collapse. Even in healthy adults, a Death Stalker sting is a medical emergency. It is treatable but requires large amount of antivenom, which can be hard to come by in the middle of the desert. Still, Egyptians are remarkably chill about the scorpions. We suppose that's what you have to do if you live around these things. We're just used to it. We just hit them with something when we see them, says Islam Muhammad, a ferry captain from Aswan, told the New York Times. The scorpion experts, however, say that people shouldn't even do that. According to Dr. Muhammad, Abdel Rahman, a molecular toxicology professor at Suez Canal University, killing Death Stalkers is just a waste. I'm very, very sad when people kill scorpions because the venom of scorpions is very rich and useful, he lamented. Much like snakes, medical researchers milk scorpions, including Death Stalkers, for their venom. But they need a lot of scorpions for that, since 3,000 of the arachnids produce only 1 gram of venom. But it's all well worth it, said Abdel Rahman. The single gram of scorpion venom can be worth $8,000. Wow. Laboratories can process the venom into antivenom to treat stings, but there are other applications as well. Research has found that Death Stalker venom could be an effective treatment for brain tumors. Guess that makes sense. If the stuff kills you, it ought to kill tumors as well. Abdel Rahman adds that unless the Death Stalkers are agitated by an oncoming flood, for example, they can be handled relatively safely. Case in point, he researched scorpions for 20 years and has never gotten stung. Professionals can catch the scorpions by the tail, by hand, but I don't recommend doing that. Yeah, I don't recommend doing that either. Who want to try and catch a scorpion by the tail? Never mind. So yeah, so Egypt, let's send prayers to Egypt for what's going on right now. Like I said, I have people who have listened to me in Egypt are still listening to me in Egypt, in actually Alexandria. So shout out to Alexandria, Egypt. Thank you for listening to the Keeping It Real with KC podcast. I appreciate it. As for scorpions, I'm not a fan of insects, arachnids, or anything like that. But there's been growth. I have to tell you this quick story too. If you want to click off now, feel free to click off now. This is whatever. But day before yesterday, a wasp, not a scorpion, a wasp came in through my fireplace. And I was like, dude, because yes, there are wasps and things like that in California, and they have spiders and all types of other stuff. But usually, for me, when I see an insect, I go in blazing. Straight blazing. Where's my spray at? Where are my shoes? Where's whatever? And also I use a good thing too as well for insects sometimes is dish detergent. Dish detergent works good. Powerful stuff. But I digress. So the wasp comes in and is flying around. And I'm looking at the wasp, and it decides to set up camp and lands on one of the lights. I'm looking for my can of bug spray. Because regardless, I don't care how nice your environment is, where you live at, you need to always have a can of bug spray on hand. Just saying. So I have my can of bug spray. And I'm about to spray him or her. I don't know how to tell them apart. And it was a big wasp too, by the way. It was big. But something said to me, you know what? Let's go ahead and see if we have some other options on the table. So I'm like, okay, Mr. Wasp. And I'm literally talking to the wasp. I kid you not. I'm like, Mr. Wasp, I need you to leave. So the wasp is still sitting there. I go to my door and I open the door, and then I go back over to the wasp and I'm like talking to the wasp. I'm like, Mr. Wasp, I really need you to leave. Attempting, to have a conversation and be peaceful. And the wasp, he gets off the light and starts flying towards the door, but then turns around and goes back towards the light. I'm like, Mr. Wasp, I really need for you to leave. I need you to work with me here. Work with me. You know how they say, help me help you. And the wasp is like inspecting the light and doing all this other stuff. And I'm like, I really hope he does not think that he's about to set up camp in my home and build a new home, especially when he's not putting in on the rent. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this again. I'm going to patience, compassion, because that's what I have to remember. Because don't forget, we're having a lunar eclipse tomorrow on the 19th in Taurus, but there's the demon star that's affiliated with the eclipse. So don't feed into the negativity. Like I tell people, practice compassion, practice patience with yourself, with others. I strongly urge that. And also, don't be surprised if some crazy stuff goes down tomorrow or over the weekend too. Just saying. But I digress. So I'm like, okay, patience, compassion. I'm trying to do this the right way. And I'm like, okay, so I close the door because I can't keep my door open that long, because of if you keep the door open too long, the security system will start doing things. So close the door again, talking to the wasp. I'm like, please, will you just leave? So the wasp gets off the light. He starts flying. And as he's flying, I open the door. And then he flies out the door. And I was so proud of myself. I was like, wow. I didn't have to come in blazing, because I still had a can of spray in my hand throughout this entire process while I was talking to the wasp. And I closed my door and I'm just like, wow, that's growth is what that is. Because the old me, I would have just sprayed at the beginning, put it in the trash can, and called it a day. But I didn't do that this time. That is growth. So yeah, that's all I have. Like I said, prayers to Egypt. I hope everything works out with the Scorpions. KIRWKC.com. Main podcasting platform. This podcast is carried on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Overcast, Bullhorn, Amazon Music, Audible, and several other podcasting platforms. Please feel free to listen to this podcast on whatever platform is most convenient for you. KIRWKC on all the social media platforms. And also, closing out, there is another story. You're probably going to fall out when you hear it. I will do my best to upload that story today. My goal is to upload the story today, because when I had seen the headline, I was like, you got to be kidding me. Sort of like this one with the Scorpions. But this one is even more out there than the Scorpion headline. So, yeah, I will do my best to upload that story today. Thank you for all the support. I love you more than you could ever know. I sincerely appreciate it. Until next time, be blessed.